last election happened because we voted to leave the European Union. Brexit may not have been the dominant campaign theme every day, but it's never been far away. So, on the final day of campaign, let's try to assess what effect it may have had, not so much on the outcome of the election as on our attitudes to the European Union. I'm joined by two people on opposite sides of the debate. Gina Miller, the pro-EU campaigner who was behind that successful legal challenge over triggering Article 50, and John Longworth, former head of the British Chambers of Commerce, who resigned to campaign for Brexit. And maybe we can get some agreement right at the beginning if I suggest to you that actually we haven't learned very much more about Brexit. Gina?
No, we haven't. For, as you say, an election that was supposed to be all about Brexit, the Brexit election. I mean, part of it is understandable. It's been overtaken by security and terrorism, and as what people are worried about. But at the same time, we could have had some detail, and we have had very little. We've actually had very little mention of policy, of how we're going to deal with the impact on the economy, because actually the state of our economy will blight everything we do.
Well, that there may be contention about that, but John Longworth, do you agree that it's been a rather odd election campaign in this respect?
Well, in respect to the fact that the election campaign hasn't been a Brexit election, yes, entirely. It was always to be expected. Domestic issues would, of course, be very important, and the terrorism, of course, has caused the election to be diverted. The real debate that's been missing, of course, is around exactly what the economic outcome might be. And the tragedy of it is that actually the Prime Minister's allowed the debate to be characterised around whether success or failure depends on a free trade arrangement. And actually, a free trade arrangement is just the cherry on the icing on the cake. The cake is much more important and is entirely in our own gift, providing that we leave the single market in the customs union.
Which you do not accept, Gina Miller.
No, I don't, because, what we needed to see is a direction of travel, how we were going to, the inevitable shortfall, because it will hit small businesses, it will hit education, it will hit our legal system, the fact that we won't have access to a legal resolution structure such as the ECJ. All those details are missing. And this was a missed opportunity because people don't really know what Brexit means. We went into this election hoping we'd get more of an idea, and I don't think we do have
And that is
idea.
certainly true, John Longworth.
Yeah, I think we're no more clued up in general about what Brexit means than we were before the election started. But of course, again, what we don't want is a soggy bottom, sugar-coated fudge as an outcome. What we really want is for the government to be able to have its cake and eat it, to have the removal from the common agricultural policy, to repatriate fisheries, to use our net contribution to invest in business growth, to remove tariffs and reduce the cost of living.
But life's not
all
like
of
that,
which
is it?
are entirely in our own hands.
Well, really?
Entirely. And the government, it's entirely independent of the negotiations. And really, for the government to allow the whole thing to be characterised as success or failure is whether we get an FTA or not.
Free trade agreement.
A free trade arrangement, yes, is a big mistake, because the reality is it doesn't really matter whether we get one or not, because that free trade arrangement would produce tariffs that add up to less than half of our net contribution each.
So therefore we can do it perfectly well by ourselves, Gina Miller.
I think this is still fantasy land. It's so much more complex than, as John says, in a free trade agreement. It's about our airways, our environment, how we're going to deal with the loss of skills in our public services. In the city, John will be aware that, there's a huge number of people who come from the EU and without. And we're already seeing agencies that are complaining that there's a loss of people applying for jobs. There are something between 8,000 and 11,000 legal instruments that might be needed. This is so complicated.
And you may or may not be right, but the evidence seems to suggest that the further away we are from the referendum, the more people who voted to stay in are now accepting that maybe it's not such a bad thing to pull out.
I absolutely don't agree with that. With my new organisation, Best for Britain, we have been on the doorstep, and actually people are just fed up of elections and referenda rather than saying that. And we actually have research that shows, just on the single market question, we asked 50% Remainers, 50% of Leavers, and of those around the country, 50% said they did not want to leave the single market, and only 21% said they did. And this is research that we've done. This is not polling, this is direct research.
What do you make of that, John?
Well, most of the opinion polls show that a lot of Remainers are actually now wanting to make the best of it, and certainly within the business community, which I'm in contact with, those people who were Remain are saying that what are the opportunities from Brexit? Let's make the best of it. In fact, there are real potential
right. So
economic
make the best of it. It's slightly different from saying, wow, this is a great opportunity.
Yeah, well, I think there are those who are saying great opportunity and those who are down the will Remainers are saying let's make the best of it. And actually the best of it is going to be better than what we had before, providing the government do the right things. What they really need to do, of course, and what's not been said, is they need to actually take back control of the timescale. The government needs to set themselves a target of Q2 next year. And if there's no progress on talks, they simply decide not to progress those talks and spend the remaining 12 months putting the resources and intellectual capacity into crystallising those benefits.
All right, and in a sentence from each of you, if you wouldn't mind, Gina Miller, if it is Theresa May, what do you want her to do if she gets in, if it's Jeremy Corbyn?
I'm very sensible. I think the most practical thing at the moment for Mrs May or the next Prime Minister is to negotiate a transitional period, because we cannot get this done in that 18 months.
John Longworth?
Transitional period is completely unnecessary because actually the real benefits of Brexit economically are entirely now on our hands. They should concentrate on the administrative aspects of Brexit, which do need to be resolved. And actually the very worst thing that we can do, whoever the Prime Minister is to say that we desperately need an FTA, because then you've just given away your negotiating position.
All right.